Hello, my name is Sevon Askew. I am playing the role of Tom Collins in the University of Michigan Musical Theater Department's production of Rent. And I am sitting here today with our department chair, someone I look up to, and also the man that holds the record for the most performances of Tom Collins in Rent, Mr. Michael McElroy. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the role of Tom Collins, which we now both have in common, and Rent as a whole. Thank you for letting me into your office today, Michael.
Thank you. You're always welcome in my office,
Oh,
Sevon.
I know.
Yes. So what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. My first one is sort of just your introduction to Rent as an artist, a performer. You were in New York, on Broadway, working on Broadway, and when this behemoth of a show came out, what was your relationship with it? Did you go in for the initial audition? Did you hear the buzz, see the show, realize it was something you wanted to be a part of? And then when you did get the opportunity to take part,
I have a really interesting history because I auditioned for it when it was at New York Theater Workshop. So I went in, got called back. Then they gave us these little cassette tapes with Jonathan singing. I think it was I'll Cover You, and I learned that. But I didn't like the show. I mean, I was like, what is this music? But I went in, I had like 2 callbacks, and then they called my agent, and they were like, we want him for something. We don't know what role yet, but we definitely want him for something. But it was coming up in the season at the same time as Violet was coming up in the season. And Violet, I had been working on for 3 years. And literally they were opening at the same time. And so I said, just take me out of Rent, at this point, because I'm going to do Violet. And then while we were doing Violet, Rent became this huge hit. And I didn't feel like, I missed out on something. I was happy to do Violet. That had been such a big part of my life. And the dream and hope was that Violet was going to move from playwrights to Broadway. Didn't happen until many years later. And so I was really heartbroken, but I was like, okay, you know what? I want a job where I know I can just be somewhere, and work. And the first thing, once the show had opened and they moved it to Broadway, it was a huge hit. People were sleeping outside to get tickets. And the first national tour came up and they were like, do you want to go on tour? Do you want to audition? I said no. Then
why'd you say no?
Because I didn't want to leave New York City. And then they called again and said, the LA company, do you want to audition? I said no. And then Jesse got a TV show. And so this was a year. It had been on Broadway, I think, since 96, and so it was now 97. And he was leaving, and they said, do you want to audition for this? And I said, oh, yes. I went in, I auditioned for Michael Greif.
Had you seen the show at this point?
No. Okay. Michael Greif, Bernie Telsey, all the producers were in the room, Jeffrey Selleck, they were all in the room. And I went in, I sang I'll Cover You, I sang the I'll Cover You reprise. And then like 2 days later, they called and offered me the job.
Wow.
And so it just...
After one? Just one?
Yeah. Because they had all come and saw me, they see me in Violet. And then I came into the show the week before I started rehearsal. Adina was leaving, and Sherry Renee Scott was replacing her. And then the next week, Jesse left, and then I replaced him. So with Marcy Harrell was the first to replace Daphne. So it was really almost the entire original cast except for 3 people. And I did it from 97 to 2001.
My next question is, what did you learn while doing the show? Again, you didn't have many preconceived notions. You saw yourself in the show, you got cast. So I'm interested, what did you learn about these people, these artists? What did you learn about Tom Collins when you were in there for that run and then you took a break, did more work, and came back to close out the original production, what you learned when you came back? And then I'd love to hear if the role taught you anything about Michael as you spent time with him.
Yeah, I didn't see the show until I was cast, and then I went to see the show. I saw a standing room. And the first thing, I was panicked because the first thing he has to do is catch this key that came from the flight. And I'm like, I don't catch things. So I was panicked about that. Then the first, Bustelo is him up on this thing throwing thing. I'm like, he has to throw, he has to catch. What is happening here? And so I was just terrified about those things. Never lost that kind of fear. But what it taught me, I moved to New York City in 1990. So I moved there at the height of the AIDS epidemic. And so that world, the East Village of that time, the people, the artists, I knew those people. I knew that area. So when I came in, because I was one of the first replacements, there was like a whole packet, and you worked with Michael Greif, you worked with the assistant, Martha, at that time, and they really gave you it was like a packet of information. That really helped to fill in what this world was.
Right. Dramaturgy. What? Yeah.
Yeah. But I knew who he was. It was weird. It was just, from the time that I started to read it and learn the music, I was like, oh, I know who he is. And it doesn't mean that there wasn't more work to be done, but I knew his heart. I immediately thought, oh, he's the Pied Piper. Right? He's the person that gathers people. He's the friend that, lots of people gravitate towards at always a good time, but you don't ever get to really know what's going on because he's so busy being there for everybody else. So that's what's so beautiful about Angel. Angel disarms him.
Yeah.
Right? And so getting to play a character, African-American, gay man who was an NYU professor.
Right.
So he was smart, that meets, falls in love, and then, we know what happens at the end. So every night you got the opportunity to play this full scope.
Yeah.
And to me, I know I'd be, have my own kind of preference for it, but I think that their relationship is the most fully realized because you see them from the time they meet until they meet again at the end.
And I would definitely say the strongest. Everyone else has their spats and their fights, and they, you look at them and they have their own troubles too, but that's love. That is love.
Yeah. Well, what is Tom Collins? What has he taught you?
What has he taught me? You have a few more years. You've spent a few more years with him than I have, but in my few months with him, one of the big things is that love. The way that he loves that, Act 1 of the show takes place on Christmas Eve, a few hours within Christmas Eve. And in that time, he's able to look at someone through the, one of the big themes of the show, No Day But Today, to take that, hear that, and say, I want to make the choice today to love this person that's in front of me. I don't know where it's going to take us, but I feel something real here, and I'm going to commit to this. And so that amount of love, and I agree with what you said, of his group of friends that, they all used to live together now, they're coming back together again, he is... I would say the most mature one of the group. He is the one when they get off the rails that is let's pull it together.
Right.
And he can sit back. He's comfortable in the observing where everyone's at, assessing, and then coming in with a response and seeing where he can best be used to help them live their full potential. And then when he meets somebody who gives even more than him, who sees that in him and wants to give him that same attention that he gives everyone else. Like you said, it disarms him. And so it's very easy to look at Collins and Angel and say, these are just great people. That, where's the dynamic in that? But seeing these great people have to go through one of the hardest journeys of the show and still keep a positive attitude and still keep the love and support for not only each other but their community around them. I don't know. It's definitely something I would love to incorporate more in my life and just make sure I'm checking in on those I love more and seeing where I can best be of service in their lives too.
And Collins is used to being in control. You know what I mean? He's, like I say, he's the Pied Piper. So it's really interesting that Angel's the one that kind of just takes lead. And he's from me, he's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
right? But even in that okay, there is an openness to possibility, right? And if you really think about from the time they meet and they talk about HIV, because of what has happened to Tom, to Collins, it's from the immediate, there's a connection because at that time, there wasn't so much information. So touching someone's blood, those kinds of things, those were off the table.
Yeah.
Right? And I think one of the reasons that I chose Rent as a part of the season, well, one of the overarching themes is that I really wanted to celebrate the diversity in our student body.
Of course.
Right? And I'll talk about this in my speech every night, but I really wanted to took us on a journey, We started in Harlem in the beginning of the season with Duke Ellington, then we went to 1930 Spain with Bernardo Alba, then we went to London and the countryside and Ernest, and now we're back to New York in the East Village of the 90s, right? All these diverse lived experiences throughout that I want to our students, you all, to have an opportunity to explore and to play and to learn about the cultures of these experiences of these times. And what has really been important in this process and why we have a cultural sensitivity coordinator was really understanding what is the journey from 2023 back to the early 1990s and understanding the culture of those people, right? The East Village now is like a overexpensive happening spot. It wasn't then. It was a lot of people squatting in abandoned apartments buildings, and so what Mark talks about at the beginning, that was real.
Yeah.
And so to get you all to understand as artists, what is the journey to those human beings, even around things like language. Right? We talked a lot about, the language that you all use today that's just commonplace, that you all use to refer to each other, the way you identify, in my day was extremely offensive and harmful. And so we had to find a way to really be able to talk about, the language in the show and why these people were choosing to say they'll use these words when they didn't necessarily identify with those words. And that was just a part of the culture of understanding the language and the difference in the time. And then your jobs as artists, we'll give you as much information as possible. And then your job is to build the bridge to go there, which, I'm excited to see. And it's hard because, I feel like I'm almost in a hologram when I'm around the show because it was such a big part of my life. And now I'm seeing it play out in present, and it almost feels disconcerting. Like I almost, it's like I almost don't even want to see it in a way because it puts me in two different places at the same time, right?
Well, when you were doing it, it took place pretty present day, and now we're doing it, and we can, objectively qualify it as a period piece, which, again, it's coming on 30 years since it premiered.
Oh my God.
And as we look, at this time, the 90s don't feel that far away, but our company, really can't understand what New York City was like then. Especially, like, even when you think of, like, 42nd Street and how, like, the, safety, the, all aspects of the city, and then the AIDS epidemic. We can't really grasp that. So having you and our incredible directing team who were in New York City during that time, and early on in the process when we sat down with y'all and you were able to say, this moment in the show, this is what, these support group meetings were like. This was what it was like when you would go 1 week and then the next week so-and-so wasn't there and you knew what that meant.
Right.
And the weight of that, by qualifying as a period piece, at first it felt like we could separate and say, but, having you here every day, seeing you every day and realizing that that was a reality, that world was a reality you lived through, definitely brought it into today. So I can understand why you feel like pulled in two different directions. And this company, I think, talking with you and hearing that, you know, we do hold that and are wanting to honor these individuals that, you know, that this tells the story of. That at the time, again, you talked about how this is a black gay man who, you know, this is the first black gay man I've ever played, Tom Collins, and like being able to step into a role that intersects many different parts of my identity for the first time. And I couldn't tell you many more in the musical theater canon that do such, especially, you know, especially before Rent in 96 at all. That's been very special as well. And when I looked at the canon growing up and was trying to, you know, where do I fit within this world, there was this strong centralizing figure of this story who had great songs that I loved and was documented so beautifully by you. And I could look at that and see, you know, when deciding this is what I wanted to do, there is a place for me. There is a place for my identity. There are great roles out there. And it also opened the door to the possibility that there will be more written. So getting a chance to play one of these roles that I, you know, saw as a doorway into this industry has been great. You've mentioned I'll cover you a couple times, and I just wanted to ask you what that phrase means to you. I'll cover you. And you know, the difference between the first time those words are said and the second time. A reprise within musical theater, you know, we're taught in our musical theater courses here with Professor Wagner, you know, when you have a reprise, something's different. You know, you're forced to analyze these lyrics differently. It may be a different tempo. And many times we're talking in the context of golden age, of the 40s, 50s, 60s. But this is a very modern and contemporary reprise in this rock musical. And it is utilized the same exact way and so effectively. But with that phrase, I'll cover you.
Yeah. It means so many different things.
Yeah.
Protection, right? When I think of covering someone standing in front of, there's also a comfort. I think of a blanket, right?
They sing that, I'll be your blanket.
Yeah, you know. And so the first time there is an innocence about it, as they're both figuring it out in that language. And the language of, you know, it being a house and your shelter.
Right.
And, you know, the fact that they talk about renting it, right? That nothing in this world is permanent, right? So to look at it as renting or being here for this moment, it's not lasting. And to frame it in terms of rent, right? That we rent these bodies in a way, because our spirits live on, but this is just a rental, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that they understand that in a very real way because they're both HIV positive. The second one, wow, it's so different. And I want to go back because, you know, I don't think any composer, when they're writing a show, know what's really going to land. Right? And I don't think that Jonathan Larson, when he was sitting down to write this story, was thinking, oh, this reprise, it's going to be brilliant. It's going to be so emotional. I don't think he was thinking that, right? I don't know how it ended up as the reprise, right? I don't know what that journey, because I wasn't there at the beginning. But it's one of those moments that is just absolute brilliance in musical theater where you go, that is something special. That's a special thing. Just like Seasons of Love, that is a special thing, right? And that Tom Collins gets to memorialize this love. Even as painful as it is, the loss is, that it is still an honoring, naming of that thing. And I always pictured it as being at his memorial, right? Yeah. And I knew where his parents were, right? I knew where they were sitting. You know, it was all these kinds of things that just made it, it was like if I just started the show and started that first moment, "You okay, honey?" I didn't have to think about the reprise. It just was there. It was, right? And that's the brilliance of the characters. That's the brilliance of the writing, where the story just unfolds, and you're exactly where you need to be. And so, for me, that covering, that kind of friendship, that kind of love that protects, that heals, that saves, that keeps it fresh. You know what I mean? It's like, I think of a top that covers something, a blanket that covers something, all of those things. And such a beautiful play on words.
Yeah.
Like renting a new lease.
Yeah.
Right? All of those things. And that them coming together and those two choosing, Collins and Angel, choosing to love, gives them a new lease on life.
Yeah.
Right? And that they get to be that for each other for whatever time they have. Whereas you see other characters who are fighting their demons in such a way that they can't come together.
Right.
Right? But these two are like, oh yeah, we got some demons, but we're going to put those aside and choose to live today and love today. What have you discovered that, we talked a little bit about like what you thought and then what it is, but what do you continue to discover about Tom as you continue to play him and allow him to?
This man is, we find out that he was expelled from MIT for what he says actual reality. And he says, and when they talk about the dream world of Santa Fe, and he says, I teach computer age philosophy. And he talks about the philosopher Heidegger, and I looked up, what this mid 20th century, these philosophers, and he's so smart, and he teaches like we talked about. And also the fact that, what he would love to teach. Besides being a computer genius, he's also a philosopher. He is just a man who sees the world as it is. He has his beliefs on it. And also is very aware of his diagnosis. And, what better person who has such a groundedness in his existence on this planet to be given, something that very well could be terminal. And it's his outlook on what our existence here means that I think motivates all the actions that he takes within the piece. That, like I was just saying, the decision to love this person, to commit to this person through, it's 90, this was written in the 90s. There was no formal gay marriage, but in literal sickness and in health. He's not afraid of death for himself, death for others. He's not really worried about his friends, I really got to he tries to get Roger out of the house, to go to this meeting, to do this, but he knows, if that's what he needs right now, I know he'll come along. He has a peace about life and an understanding about it that allows him to give grace when needed. But I just think the peace, and he lives in the present moment in a way that I don't personally. I mean, we know we have busy schedules here. This profession is very busy. The campus is very busy. But he's allowed to, spoiler, but in the first moments, Collins gets beat up. And, of course he's upset about that. But then he meets this person. And he also has his friend's show he's going to tonight. And he hasn't been in town for a while. And he keeps going, That was a part of his day, but he's not going to let it ruin his Christmas Eve. That was that present moment. Now it's on to the next present moment. And it really has just illuminated a way I think we all could take a page out of his book. I'd love to read his take on philosophy and take his seminar at NYU. But yeah, his presence and the serenity that he can enter a space and enters the show with. And also, he's a revolutionary. Him and Maureen, Maureen does it through her show, her performance piece.
Right.
And I love that I'm blocked to sit like right underneath Cece, who's playing Maureen, and watch her. And I'm like, that's my best friend doing the work. And in La Vie Boheme, we sing together Anarchy Revolution and have that battle cry and have that connection. Again, when I looked at him, I was like, I made the joke. I was like, Collins is just such a great guy, which, such a departure for me. It's going to be a hard play, real character study. But I think I finally realized why he's such a good guy. And being able to ground that in him is just, allowed me to also have a peace when I get to put on that coat every night and step on that stage and put the coin in that payphone.
And also, that's once again a literal representation of covering.
Yes.
That Angel buys him that coat because his coat got stolen.
Yes, got stolen.
When he got mugged.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think what I want audiences to go away with, especially in this day in which we're living, which is so insane, where we are so much more focused on all of the things that divide us, because that's what's being put out into the world a lot, or at least that's what we hear the most. That what Jonathan did so beautifully with the show was to really, the message being that, you could spend your life and time in a place of complaint and all the things that are going wrong, or this life or death sentence, but the way that you have to measure your life is in love. Who you love, who loves you. That is the most important thing, because as we actually saw play out with Jonathan Larson, your tomorrow is not promised. So you do have a choice. You have a choice, which we see many of the characters grappling with, of either to live in the angst and the frustrations and the hurts and the past harms, or you can choose to say, yeah, that is who I am, but that's not the totality of who I am. And I'm going to choose to be open-hearted and choose to love when love comes my way. And I think that Collins and Angel do that so beautifully. The other couples kind of struggle with that.
They do a little bit.
They're having a little struggle. They're on the struggle bus. But I think that if audiences today, specifically today, can come away with that message, I think that we've done our job as artists with a wonderful piece of material that really does celebrate life in the midst of all the other stuff that's going on, that you still can celebrate life.
I feel like in Seasons of Love, probably Rent's most famous song at the top of Act 2. I always was taken when looking back. It's Act 1, takes place on this one night. Act 2 takes place over the course of a year. And they say the line, let's celebrate, remember a year in the life of friends. And I feel like that is kind of like, this is what you're about to see in Act 2. And one thing, as we're working on it, our director, Deb, is saying, like, this song is full of questions. When asking, how do you measure a year? These are the amount of minutes you have. We know the number. If we're not measuring in time, how would we measure that? And, everyone, the way we do it, everybody kind of throws out an idea. Maybe we measure in this way. And then we ask the question, how about love? What if you measured your totality on this earth, or this year, you measure, I guess what one would say, the worth of that time in love? And I think that Collins takes that question to heart. And is able to measure in love. And that is why he's able to do so and love so fully. Some of like a lot of us in life, and the audience may hear the question and let it, what if? They know the song, they know the lyric. But it is one of those things, especially Rent as a show that people think they know. I'd love the audience to leave hearing something they never heard before, even if they've been playing that album since it came out, or sang the songs in choir, or sang Scenes of Love at church. Like, I want them to, oh wait, I've known this song forever, but now seeing, you know, our company, these students, the way we're framing it, allow them to ask themselves that question. Well, thank you for allowing me to pester you. It was tough, you know, in January when we were auditioning, and I had to stand there and sing I'll Cover You Reprise with you behind the table and act like everything was calm, cool, and collected. But I'm very grateful to be in the Tom Collins Brotherhood and to have you here as a guardian angel as I step into his shoes.
Yeah, it was not hard for me. It was just like I said, it was like a hologram. It's like I feel like you know, I don't know, you're too young to remember the original Star Trek, when they would like beam them into different places.
Beam me up,
so I was
Scotty,
like, I'm literally on stage at the Nederlander, and I'm sitting in the Towersley at the same time, because I can actually remember what I was doing when those words were being said, because I did the show for so long.
Right.
And so it was a weird, almost out-of-body experience. And then you all were doing, like, working on songs, and then I found myself, I'm like singing along, and I'm like, Michael, shut up. But it was just coming out because it was so deeply ingrained in me. And it's funny because I took 6 years and went and did other things and came back the year before we closed. And when I was coming back, they gave me the script and the score, which I think I have sitting up there. And I opened it up after 6 years, and I looked at the first page, and I was like, I don't remember any of this. I don't remember any of it. Don't remember. And I'm turning pages. I found my old script, and I'm turning pages. I'm like, nope, nothing. And then literally I got on stage and started rehearsing, and literally all just kind of flooded back. Yeah. And I was like, okay, because I was panicked. I was like, how come I don't remember where I was, what I was doing?
Right.
But it's such a gift when you get an opportunity to revisit something. And my life had changed so drastically between the first time and those 6 years later that I had a whole different appreciation for Tom Collins, a whole different appreciation for what it meant to be in love, and a whole appreciation for, or an understanding rather, of what it means to lose, to experience loss. So that was a gift, to go back 6 years later, 6 years older, and go, okay, you know, and then to be able to close it with that company of people was just so incredibly special. And know that was like going to be captured forever.
Yeah.
And on YouTube.
Forever and ever with millions of views.
Oh my Lord. Yeah. So it's a special thing. It's a special show that will continue to touch people's lives. And I'm just happy that we get to have that moment here.
And we're very grateful that you're sharing that with this community. And as I'm almost out of here, my last U-Prod, that this is what we get to, my class gets to, you know, end this year on.
Good.
Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you all for watching, and we hope to see you at Rent.